Good Tuesday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock in time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Browns still in that period where they will be getting ready for training camp in a little over a month. They'll start out in West Virginia. Let's welcome in Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Mary Kay, they wrapped up minicamp out in Berea last week. What were your takeaways, some of the things that stood out about minicamp?
Well, first and foremost, Deshaun Watson looked excellent. He really, really looked good. He's comfortable in this scheme. They're letting him do so many more things at the line of scrimmage. He's going to have a lot more responsibility in the no huddle, sliding protections, all those kinds of things. So, I think that's one of the key things is that he's really, really cool with the offense now and feels good about what Kevin Stefanski has him doing. He was very, very sharp. That helped all of the receivers look really good. So you had a number of standout guys, including Elijah Moore, Marquise Goodwin, Donovan Peoples-Jones. So those were some of the things on the offensive side of the ball. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you can really see where they're going with this in terms of the defensive line, the rotation. They're going to use a lot of defensive linemen. It's the marquee spot on the team right now. They'll use 5 down linemen a lot. Zadarius Smith lined up inside a lot. And you've got, Myles Garrett and Obo on the outside. You've got Dalvin in there with Zadarius. I think those will be the starters for right now. But again, there will be 5, and they'll rotate 8 in there. Keep these guys fresh and make sure that Myles and guys like Zadarius are ready to keep pressuring that quarterback right up until the fourth quarter.
How is there a marked difference in your mind between what you saw with Deshaun Watson relative to this year and last year? Everybody kind of has said he's way ahead of where he was last year, but the eye test.
Yeah, it's a combination of a lot of things. I thought that Deshaun Watson looked very athletic, very agile last year as well. So I can't honestly say that I think he got out there and just didn't look like a good quarterback last year. That wasn't it at all. I was struck last year also by his agility, his arm talent. He just looked different. That's what those multiple Pro Bowlers do. They get out there on the grass and they just look different than everybody else. So he looked that way to me last season too. But I think the difference now is just comfortability in the scheme. And then another big thing in my mind is the personnel around him. They gave him 4 new pass catchers. So there are all different kinds of receivers at every level of the offense. There are, there are guys with size. There are guys with speed. There are guys with separation, route running. You name it now, he's got it. And he really, for the most part, didn't even have Amari Cooper. So once they put it all together, I think it'll look good. But I think the personnel has a lot to do with it.
So this is from the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. Just ways that the Browns can help Deshaun Watson this season.
I think the feel will be better. It can't be worse than what it was. And now he has the full offseason, and he's not going to have a 3-month limbo where he's going to practice with the team and then be away from the team, and everybody's going to have been playing in that window, and you're trying to step in when you're so far behind. So, if we're being completely objective, I understand why it was a struggle through all the context, but predicting outcomes of what it's going to look like now is almost impossible, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's what inspires me to say, go get Hop. Give him something that he knows. We both watched the tape on Hop when the rumbling started, I think back in March, and we did an episode on him, and we both came away feeling pretty good about the player that he still is and how he can help a football team. And I think the presence of Amari Cooper and Nick Chubb and David Njoku and Elijah Moore is a great place for him to be able to come in and be a piece, but also give Deshaun something stabilizing. I think you've seen that from a lot of teams. A lot of it's been reuniting college quarterbacks with college receivers.
Right.
We've seen that, and we've seen that work. And I would want to do the same for Deshaun. I know it's a unique situation, but if I got that invested in Deshaun, I take advantage of this opportunity to sign Hop if I can.
Hey, Mary Kay, that makes sense. I know you have written about why you think the Browns should pursue Hopkins, but again, you also say it's a long shot. Take us through kind of the thought process.
Yeah, from the very beginning, when he first became available, I wrote right from the outset that it was unlikely to happen. And I think we've talked about this here on this very show, that it was unlikely to happen, but that you could not slam the door shut on it. You couldn't say never about it. So that's where it was until then Deshaun Watson kind of got involved and started to lobby for his friend. And at that point, I assumed that the Browns might bring him in for a visit, give him a little bit of a look-see, and sort of try to give Deshaun Watson, a weapon that he seems to want. But that was really not going to happen. Even though Deshaun was out there saying that, it just wasn't in the Browns' plans. And so I kind of had to revise a story last week where, I thought maybe he might come in. And then, I had to change it and basically say that they had no plans to bring him in once I reported it out through the day. So that's where it stands right now. They do not plan to bring him in. As we know, D-Hop was with the Titans yesterday. He's visiting the Patriots today and tomorrow, I believe it is, or coming up this week. And then he might schedule more visits after that. The only way he would end up here is if the Browns end up with significant injury and D-Hop waits and his market, kind of isn't what he wanted it to be. If he figures, let me wait and let somebody go down in training camp or a preseason game and let somebody need me enough to give me the money that I feel I deserve. So if he doesn't get what he wants, he's not just going to sign with anyone. Remember, he sort of wrote his own ticket a little bit and, kind of orchestrated his exit out of Houston. And, this is his first foray into free agency, and he's not going to just sign with any team. The situation is going to be right for him, and the money is going to be right for him.
Yeah, and again, he's getting to the point in his career where he sees it as being finite. So he has to find a way to get, another payday, if you will, for lack of a better term, is because NFL players have finite careers.
Yes, absolutely. They do. And he's obviously getting up there. So this is not a situation where he's a 26-year-old receiver out there hitting free agency for the first time. He's 30, actually 31 now, just turned 31. So, he's got to grab the brass ring while he still can. And he wants the situation to be right. He really does want to have an opportunity to challenge for the Super Bowl and do all those kinds of things. And, there could be a team that might see him as the final piece to the puzzle. But, maybe they're not really ready to pull the trigger right now. Maybe they'll get ready as they move forward. And so, I don't think he wants to lock himself into a situation that isn't ideal.
Before we go to break, Perrion Winfrey, case dismissed upon completion of a pretrial diversion program. Take us through, I know you tweeted that out and you reported on it. Take us through that and just your thoughts on Winfrey. He was at mandatory minicamp.
You know what? He was only out on the practice field on the final day. He was there, but he was in the facility working inside on his own for the first 2 days. We asked Kevin Stefanski, was this disciplinary? And he declined to be specific about that, saying only that Perrion was healthy. So we were kind of assuming that perhaps it was a disciplinary thing, but I don't even know if that's true because I don't know that they are, really kind of, dismayed with him for being with Greg Newsome out that night, when they both got robbed at gunpoint. I really don't know if that had anything to do with it or not, or if it was something else. But, they are sticking with him for now. And it is time for Perrion to step up to the plate to prove that he is professional and that he can get this job done and that he's ready to be here. And there's so much competition at the position. He really needs to to be able to prove that he can do it. I mean, he's got to try to be beating out Zadarius Smith inside there and Siaka and Jordan Elliott and, and then, so yeah, that's, it's a tall order for him, but he's got to prove he can do it.
Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I. Going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. I went back and watched some of Watson's games, and he does get sacked a lot. Jacoby Brissett, in 11 games he played, he only was sacked 24 times. Watson, in the 6 games, was sacked 20 times. In those 6 sacks, he lost 106 yards. Also, for his career, he has been sacked 9.2% of his dropbacks. I have a few reasons as to why, but the voicemail would be way too long. Why do you think that is? Can he fix that, or that's just who he is? Thanks.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Mary Kay, the sacks are something that do usually happen.
Well, there are a number of things, there are a number of reasons for that and a number of things that they can and do need to do. First of all, these guys didn't really know how to block for Deshaun Watson last year. They have to learn to do that. They were blocking for Jacoby Brissett, completely different style of quarterback. Deshaun is very mobile. You have to hang on a little bit longer in some cases. You got to move around. You got to be available to block for him, where he is on the move. So that's part of it, and that's not going to be easy. It's something that we're going to have to really keep an eye on with, guys like Jed Wills and all of them really. So that's part of it. And then the Browns are going to have to scheme it up to try not to let him get sacked that much. That is putting him at way too much risk. So he's going to have some rules. He's going to have some, some outlets, some rules, and, some things that he can do to not get sacked. He has to avoid those sacks to avoid a torn ACL or something like that. So he's going to have to be very, very careful in that regard. They are going to take advantage of his legs, as they should, but they have to be smart about it. And he's going to have to get rid of the ball quickly at times, more quickly than he sometimes wants to. But I think the fact that he has an upgraded receiving core will help him now. There were times last year where he looked out there and he just didn't see anyone open. So now he's got guys that can separate, guys that can get downfield. I mean, he should be able to have targets where he can get that ball out, guys that can adapt to him throwing on the run and sight adjustments and all that kind of stuff. So I think if you throw it all into the hopper, it should be better.
Yeah, that's fair. And remember, he's a guy that always thinks he can make a play happen. The guys that have those Pro Bowl quarterbacks have a belief that I can find a way to make something happen. And that will lead to some additional sacks.
Yes, it will. But, it sometimes also leads to additional touchdowns. And when you look at the Browns' touchdown numbers last year, Jacoby Brissett only had, I think it was 12 touchdown passes. Yeah, I think Jacoby had 12 and Deshaun had 7. So they had a total of 19. That was tied for lowest in the NFL. The Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, had 41. So they had less than half of what the Chiefs had. That's unacceptable. That's not going to get you to the playoffs. That's not going to get you above 500. So that needs to change, and it will change. there will definitely be more touchdown passes thrown this season. Deshaun Watson, in his time at Houston, had seasons where he had like 26, 33 by himself. So there will be plenty more of those. And now he has more weapons to throw the ball to. And I think all of these things will make an enormous difference.
All right. This is from the NFL, Lockdown NFL Scouting Podcast, trying to forecast Deshaun Watson in 2023.
You got no clue. And other than the year in 2020, like 2020, his adjusted net yards per completion was over 8. It was like 8.2. And leaders last year, Pat Mahomes last year had a 7.51 adjusted net yards per attempt. So Deshaun Watson, 3/4 of a yard higher than that back in 2020. So when the polls are that extreme and he missed the amount of time that he missed, we didn't feel right putting him anywhere other than pink. It's just going to be impossible to know exactly where this is going to play until probably middle of October.
An impossible team to predict. We like the rest of what you got. We just have
like a
no
lot of the
idea
rest
how
of what
good
you
your
got,
quarterback is.
Right.
But the good news is your quarterback has proven for multiple years to be one of the best in the league. It's been a while.
So that adjusted net yards takes into account sacks and the like. That's one of the reasons we do that. That's how good he was in 2020. It was 3/4 of a yard better than the best last season.
Yeah, and, I think that, people seem to forget how good he was. People do seem to tend to forget 2020. It's a what have you done for me lately league. There are so many good young quarterbacks. People have kind of forgotten about Deshaun Watson. Now, if he came back and lit it up at the end of last year, that would be one thing. But he wasn't really necessarily able to do that. And then you add in all of the off the field stuff, and people just aren't buying into him right now. But I think it's a little bit premature to sort of write him off and just say, oh, well, that was him before. I mean, he's still young. I mean, this is not like some 39-year-old quarterback. He's a young quarterback who was off for a couple of years, but it's not like he wasn't working out. He wasn't practicing. I mean, he was staying in shape and he was working out. So, I just think it's a lot of things together, including learning a new offense, learning a new city, dealing with everything he was dealing with last year, and knocking that rust off. And I think it should be a lot better this year.
Yeah, and again, he should be entering the prime years of his NFL career coming up, without question. All right, the Browns remade their wide receiving, quote-unquote, room, if you will. How good do you think it is? And one of the young guys that's still there, Donovan Peoples-Jones, I know you wrote an article about how he handled that. Take us through all of that.
Yeah, what I think Donovan Peoples-Jones, first of all, he's quiet. And it's easy to forget those quiet guys. But, as I wrote today, he kind of planted his flag this spring back in that receiver room to say, hey, don't forget about me. They went out and they added these 4 new pass catchers, Elijah Moore, Marquise Goodwin, Cedric Tillman, Jordan Akins. I throw Jordan Akins in there. He's a tight end, but really a big receiver. So they added all these guys. And, people haven't really been talking about Donovan Peoples-Jones that much. But let's not forget, he came 161 yards last year away from a 1,000-yard season. And that was with Deshaun Watson suspended for the first 11 games of the season. So Donovan Peoples-Jones, the game is slowing down for him. He's ready to take it up to another level. He had a really nice spring. And in minicamp, I thought he really stood out. I watched him catch some touchdown passes in the back of the end zone, keep his toes in bounds, and he just looked really good. And I think he's ready to say, hey, I'm still here and I'm not going to let anybody forget about me. He's also heading in to the final year of his contract, so it's a big year for him. He's got to prove to the Browns that either he deserves an extension or he needs to go out and show other teams that he can hit the jackpot on the open market. So lots going on with DPJ right now.
All right, before we go to break, I know you've done this on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. 53-man roster, real early, because it's before training camp. What did you guys come up with? Who were some of the interesting bubble guys, and which way did they land?
A couple of the guys that we really debated were in the receiving room. It was David Bell Dan did not have him on, Dan Lobby did not put him on his initial 53-man roster. But I don't see Andrew Berry parting ways with such a high draft pick so early. I don't think that'll happen. I think he'll make the team. I suppose they could try to get him on the practice squad, but you never know, because this is a deep receiving core. Some other team might not be as deep and be able to put him on the 53. So I think they'll hang on to him. Jacob Phillips was another one. Jacob's been injured a lot, and that doesn't help his case. He's got to be able to stay on the field. But I think because there are some other injuries going on at linebacker that Jacob will be around. They like Jacob. He was a 3rd-round pick in Andrew's first draft here as GM. And I don't think they're going to be ready to give up on him right away. We talked about Nick Harris as a backup center. He's one where, if push comes to shove and you need that extra spot to hang on to a wide receiver or another defensive back, then, he's a player that you might have to think about. If Luke Whippler can go out and be your backup center, then, you might end up keeping Luke Whippler, Michael Dunn as your backup guard. And, these are some things that they're going to look at. 3rd quarterback, I think they'll keep DTR on the 53. I don't think they want to take that kind of a risk. And then, I would say that's about it. Those are some of the, the key spots we went over.
Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey guys, Dan in Maryland here. I was wondering what your thoughts were on these renegotiated contracts for Harrison Bryant and Jordan Elliott. I know the conventional wisdom is that this pretty much makes them locks to make the roster, and maybe it does increase their chances overall of making the roster, but it also seems to me that it makes them more attractive trade targets as well, because even though their guaranteed money's gone up, the overall value of their contracts has gone down, and if teams are willing to give up assets for them, they will look at them as guys who are going to be able to help them and make their team anyhow, so the bit about the guaranteed money probably isn't as much of an issue as it is reducing the overall value of the contract. Just wondering what you all are thinking on that. Keep up the good work. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails, Mary Kay. I think they like both of them, and I think it does make both of them locks to make the team, unless somebody gives them, a 4th, 5th round pick, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that could always happen as they move forward if they have a surplus at a position and someone is willing to give up a draft pick, because of course we know that they have surrendered a lot of draft picks in the Deshaun Watson trade, and if they can recoup something like that, maybe they would be open to doing that. But as of right now, Jordan Elliott is still a strong candidate to make the team. Once again, Andrew Berry doesn't give up on his draft picks easily at all, especially not 3rd round picks. Those 3rd round picks are eventually supposed to be either starters or key contributors. And I think right now at this moment, behind Za'Darius Smith is Jordan Elliott. Siaki is still trying to work his way to that level. So Jordan, because he has some experience, is, he's above him or in front of him on the depth chart there. So don't think they're ready to give up on, on these guys yet. But in terms of contract extensions, I think they're willing to let some of these guys play their extensions out, like Donovan Peoples-Jones. They did not extend him in the offseason, and and they're going to see how the season goes, and it's an opportunity for him to make a bunch of money and and set his market price, and also for the Browns to see what he can do in 2023.
And again, those kind of things happen when you have talented people that are going to get contracts. I mean, that's one of the reasons they're in that situation with Donovan Peoples-Jones. Donovan Peoples-Jones is an NFL receiver. It's just a matter of what teams are going to pay him for that second contract.
Yeah, and that's why this year is kind of big for him. Now, for him, the good news is the fact that I think in 3 wides, he's going to be out on the field a lot. The challenging news for him is that they have a lot of wide receivers, and if they keep, 6 receivers, 7 receivers, they're going to want to rotate a number of those guys in and use different guys for different things. I mean, if they keep, a David Bell, they're probably going to want to use David Bell at times. You're going to have to use a Marquise Goodwin when you need that vertical stretch at times. So, he might not get the same amount of targets that he got last year. At the same time, he's going to be trying to come up with big production.
I know you wrote an article about this. How does Myles Garrett feel about sharing the line with Zadarius Smith?
You know what? So far, it seems great. I think Myles is coming off a year in which, he recognizes that Jadeveon Clowney wasn't necessarily always thrilled with how things were going. He wasn't overly, enthused about being switched over to the tougher blocker and letting Myles take the more favorable matchup. And, that created a little bit of, just under the surface tension. Although Jadeveon was adamant about the fact that his beef was not with Myles in any way, shape, or form. But still, there just wasn't a synergy there per se. And, those guys can help each other out on the line, help each other look good, help each other get their numbers, their sacks, and all those kinds of things. So I think Myles and Zadarius are really determined to make this work. They're both excited. Myles recognizes that Z can take some heat off of him. That should help him. And if it works out the way that it should, they should both get double-digit sacks.
All right, before I let you go, this is from NFL Network's Good Morning Football, and it's Kyle Brandt talking about teams that are on the cusp of winning their first Super Bowl. This is from a list that haven't won it. Take a listen at who Kyle Brandt feels is on the cusp here.
I think there's some interesting ones to answer this question that stick out. Like, I find this very interesting.
Wait, you gotta stay in the middle. You gotta stay in the middle.
I know, but I'm talking about the whole map.
Oh, okay.
I find some things interesting. I think that one is, they have Vrabel, and they have Henry, and they have Tannehill, and they're all the way down, like with these guys starting over. But the answer to my question is this one. I think this is also fascinating. Do they deserve to be in here? I think they do. I really do. And I talk about this all the time whenever the Browns come up, which is not often. There's this sort of weird taboo about the Browns that we've been living in for the past year and a half that we are now forced to break through because they're unbelievably talented. They have a top 3 defensive player. They have a coach who is coach of the year. They have Deshaun Watson. They got great players. I think they're going to win some games this year.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to start talking about the Browns as a football team. I actually think it's the Browns, and I think they could surprise people in that division.
And Mary Kay, I can't argue the roster, I think, is at that level.
Some weird word choices there, right?
Yes.
Forced to talk about the Browns and break through a taboo. And I don't know if that's code for Deshaun Watson off the field issues. It could be, because I think a lot of people feel that way. So maybe that's what he's talking about. But certainly from a talent standpoint, I mean, think about it. When's the last time the Browns have had a quarterback like this and everything else that they have? This is the most talented roster that I've covered. Sure, it has to come together. It has to be coached right. It has to be called right. The culture has to be there. But I really think that there's a chance that this team can be pretty good.
Yeah, and as with any football season, you have to have a little bit of luck to reach what the roster's potential is.
Oh, absolutely. You have to have health. There are certain things that go on with your opponents. I mean, you can catch breaks like there's no tomorrow. You can have, the toughest quarterback in your lineup, might have the flu that week. I mean, you have to be able to catch little breaks along the way. Your guys have to stay healthy. Some of the calls have to go your way. So there's all kinds of things that go into it. And the margin for error is very, very slim.
Mary Kay Cabot, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Mary Kay.
Thank you.
Mary Kay Cabot, make sure you check her out. Always great Browns coverage, cleveland.com, as well as the pages of the Plain Dealer. We'll continue talking Browns. Casey Kinnamon from Dawg Pound Daily, straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. So this is from the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. Should the Browns consider signing DeAndre Hopkins?
If you get past the first waves of free agency and you add Zadarius Smith and DeAndre Hopkins to this nucleus that you have.
Yeah. I think that would mean a lot for Deshaun, right? We're going to get to Deshaun, but like a player like that, to give him some familiarity, a guy he's thrown a lot of footballs to, it'd be a high priority for me if I were Cleveland.
And I don't think that DeAndre Hopkins' potential hypothetical arrival takes anything away from Elijah Moore.
No.
I think that those reps probably come at the cost of Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's a good player. Right. We both graded him as an adequate level starter. I loved him coming out of Michigan. I had like a second round grade on him. Coming
Still
out of
really
Michigan.
young too. Yeah.
Yeah. So like there is some long term there, but you'd certainly like to think that a guy like DeAndre Hopkins for these young receivers like Cedric Tillman and Elijah Moore and David Bell and Donovan Peoples-Jones, like they would benefit from having Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins as two really good route runners. And Nuke has made so much of his killing on option routes, working from the slot, kind of identifying post-snap, and kind of those football instincts of Cooper and his route running and stems to make everything look the same until it's not. And DeAndre Hopkins with pre-snap or post-snap processing to be able to identify coverage leverage and build chemistry and kind of be the translator, if you will, between Deshaun Watson and a lot of these young guys. I think there's a great opportunity there for that entire wide receiver room to get better long-term, not just what DeAndre Hopkins would bring in a one-year situation.
And with that, let's welcome in Casey Kinnamon from Dawg Pound Daily. Casey, that it makes sense. The question, I think, is going to be price. Everything being equal, Hopkins may prefer to be with the Browns, but I don't necessarily think everything's going to be equal.
Yeah, they only have $15 million to spend, and they're going to be judicious with it. For me, it boils down to one thing. Is Deshaun Watson behind the scenes pounding the table to Andrew Berry saying, hey, get this guy, I have to have him? Because if that's happening, then all your eggs are in the Watson basket. You got to do what you got to do to make him comfortable. But I think if that was the case, they would have made a trade for him. Andrew Berry doesn't want to pay market price for anyone. He'll prefer to make a trade if he can, because that's where he gets the best value in return. And he's been on the trading block this entire time, and there was no talks. You didn't hear anything leaking that Cleveland was trying to make a deal for DeAndre Hopkins. Still leads me to believe that behind the scenes, Deshaun Watson is not saying, hey, this is a thing I have to have.
No, but at the same time, there's a lot to be said. You have a lot invested in Deshaun Watson. If DeAndre Hopkins, if you feel he's going to give him even some familiarity and just a security, you go out and you try to do it unless it puts you in a jackpot for the salary cap down the road, which is why you can't just go out and spend that $15 million, because eventually those bills come due.
Yeah, like you said, they definitely come due. And Andrew Berry, he's very smart about how he goes about allocating these funds, and he's already made investments into the wide receiver room for this year and did it on the cheap. So to come over the top and then add DeAndre Hopkins to what he already did probably doesn't sit with their plan. But like you said, if it's something that you think is going to put them over the top, then you make that move. But it also brings into focus, what is the future plans for Donovan Peoples-Jones? Because if he's firmly in their future, then they're not going to make that move. But if they're thinking they might have to walk away from him, then it would make sense to bring DeAndre in, It's just an evolving thing. And we're seeing DeAndre take all these visits right now. And the Browns aren't in discussions at this point for a visit. But it wouldn't surprise me if he does schedule one later this week, and then these talks can really start to heat up for us.
Yeah, well, again, he's trying to establish what his market is given the current landscape in the NFL. So, and the Browns have to let that play out. All right, I know you've written an article about this. Is it okay to be excited about the Browns' offense after that performance that they had at mandatory minicamp, which by all accounts was great?
Yeah, it was just a barrage of clips hitting us of just success, left and right. Marquise Goodwin getting deep, seeing Elijah Moore make these great grabs over the middle. Just a lot of sensory stuff. But then, you have to weigh that. A lot of Browns fans right now, just especially after the last 2 years underperforming, they're guarded. I see too much good. I see the possibilities. What gets me excited. You're seeing the possibilities. You look at all these pieces they added in. They're all making plays during minicamp. That's not always been the case in the past. Then you look at someone like Elijah Moore in particular. Just be excited that they have a plan for that guy. That wasn't a guy they just wound up with. Like, they went and got him for a reason. They have a plan for him, and it is obvious by the alignment and the assignments they're putting him in. And then the whole thing comes down to this. Deshaun Watson looked good. I mean, it didn't look like he was rusty out there. Everything was clicking. He was hitting people in stride. Ball placement was perfect. Timing was great. And that's what this all boils down to. For Watson to come out and look the way he did. Now, that doesn't mean anything because it's in shirts and shorts against air for the most part. But it could have went the other way. Believe that. It could have went and there could have been balls just crow hopping, hitting the ground. That wasn't the case. It looked good. And just the variance of outcomes for this team is so great. Well, they showed you what is possible. And I think that is worth getting excited about by itself.
Yeah, and there have been plenty of mandatory minicamps where the quarterback and passing game didn't look great in the recent history. So this from the Bleacher Report. Every team's biggest storyline to follow, and for the Browns, we know what it is. It's year 2 of Deshaun Watson. And again, the Hopkins issue becomes a question. Year 1 was all over the place. Minicamp, as we mentioned, he appeared to be far ahead of where he was a year ago. The other thing that's really interesting, Casey, when he was asked, is he ready to say that the rust is shaken off? He said, no, it doesn't. I'm not going to be ready to say that until it's full go in regular season.
Yeah, he said, ask me September 10th after the game, which that's the right response. You can't declare they're already there. But boy, didn't Bleacher Report hit this out of the park? Yes, this is the storyline. It doesn't get any bigger than this for the Browns. The whole season hinges on whether he is up to snuff or not, and this could be, like I said, the variance of outcomes. Like the variance of outcomes is the highest of the highs, or this could be a train wreck. The plane could hit the mountain, and that's all on the table, and it all boils down to Deshaun Watson. So without a doubt, he is the biggest storyline. I would say not just for the Browns, but for the AFC and possibly the NFL.
Yeah, that's fair. If Deshaun Watson is back to 2020 Deshaun Watson, all of a sudden there's a new team that's creeping up into the, hey, you got to watch out for this team, being the Browns, to be an AFC championship contender, without question.
Yeah, prepare to see a lot of flex games if that's the case.
Yeah,
They'll be on the national discussion at that point.
I agree wholeheartedly. All right, PFF came out with their 2023 offensive line rankings. Eagles were number 1. Browns were number 2, up 4 spots. Best player, Joel Bitonio, allowed 1 sack all season, earned an 84.5 PFF run blocking grade. The Chiefs were behind them at number 3. As well. And they admit Browns underperformed last season. All the pieces are back, and there's some cohesion as well. Don't underestimate how important it is that 4 of those 5 have played together multiple years, and all 5 of them played together last year.
Yeah, if you're building an offensive line, that's exactly what you want. You want cohesion. You want it's such a, individual performances get ranked out so often, but as far as the offensive line, it is a unit, and that's what this exactly is. But they should be at this level. They're being paid to be this level, So if they were to fall out of that top 5, you'd have to consider it a massive disappointment, considering the money they're making across the board.
Casey Kinnamon from Dawg Pound Daily and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll have more talk from the national perspective about DeAndre Hopkins, plus 3 free agents that Browns fans will want, but should the Browns sign them? Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from Dawg Pound Daily. This is from Pro Football Talk. Mike Florio, Chris Sims, talking about DeAndre Hopkins and what they hear about him from across league sources.
You and I know enough people to know it's inescapable.
His reputation is not great.
Practice.
Right.
Guy doesn't practice.
Right.
Bad teammate stuff. He's got to do something to counter that. And this is where having a good agent can help you, because the agent is aware of all that stuff. If the agent has people who is willing to be candid with the agent is well aware of what's being said. Doesn't practice, not a great teammate. I got to reverse that. I got to change that perception. I got to get him out there in front of some of these people so they can see that he's ready to commit to doing what needs to be done in order to get this guy not just the best possible offer, but any opportunity.
Yeah.
It may just be the team say, sorry, too many negatives here. We don't want to go down this path, and we don't want a guy who settles for something far less than what he wants, because then he's going to come in here, he's going to have a stick up his butt.
That's right.
He's going to be unhappy that he didn't get what he wanted, and then when he starts playing well, he's going to be banging on the door for more money. We just don't want to. We don't want to introduce those dynamics into our locker room.
And Casey, I hear what they're saying. I like Mike Florio. I like Chris Sims. They've been real cordial, and we've used them a couple times on the show. My question would be this. His first visit with the Tennessee Titans, Mike Vrabel, was in Houston. His next visit is with Bill O'Brien. That was the head coach. That doesn't really add up.
Yeah, if it was about character issues, you wouldn't see people who have worked with him in the past attempt to bring him in. The Vrabel one makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me is the O'Brien one. That went terribly at the end. You know, like the way he got rid of Hopkins, and then the things that were said afterwards about he didn't like the fact that his family was always coming around at practice. So from a Hopkins perspective, the trip to New England doesn't make sense to me. You know, but all this boils down to on the field. They can throw this character thing, this practice thing. If you can complete first downs and catch touchdowns, so much will get overlooked. And he's been crazy throughout his career. So productive. You know, I don't see that being the straw that's going to keep him from getting an opportunity.
Yeah, and again, I would be more concerned with that talk, you know, based on recent history with Odell Beckham Jr. and the like. If it wasn't guys that have a history with him. Don't forget, Vrabel was in Houston when he was there under Bill O'Brien. So this from Dawg Pound Daily. 3 free agents Browns fans will want, but they won't be signed. Number 3, defensive tackle Shelby Harris. Number 2, running back Ezekiel Elliott. And number 1, the aforementioned DeAndre Hopkins. I'm still not sure that Hopkins is going to get the $15 million that he's looking for, although the Patriots do have some money. Just your thoughts. I think Hopkins is still a possibility. I don't think it's likely, but I think it's a possibility.
Yeah, it's not off the table by any means. There's no way you could point to this wide receiver room and say it would be worse by adding DeAndre Hopkins. But I'll point to the first guy on that list, Shelby Harris. Man, he's a quality defensive tackle, and if there becomes a way to manage to get him on the team, I don't see the Browns turning him down. You know, like would come down to money, obviously, but I don't think he's going to be someone who commands so high of a salary that it's just off the table. Now, he is more of a run-stuffing defensive tackle, and given the addition of Dalvin Tomlinson and you drafted Ika, I could see that them, if they did add another defensive tackle, to make that more of the pass-rushing variety like a Matt Ioannidis. But then we can move on to Ezekiel Elliott. All that talk's crazy to me. I don't see a path. I don't see a way that Andrew Berry is looking to add a veteran like that, given the fact that they just let go of a veteran in Kareem Hunt for the same reason that you would not sign an Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a guy who's just lost a step and has limitations, I don't think that you bring Ezekiel Elliott, and that doesn't make any sense to me.
No, I think the only way you get a veteran, if somehow Dalvin Cook wants to be reunited and it's at a lower dollar figure, or if there's a pass catcher that you can use effectively out of the backfield, I think that's the only way they add veterans. Let's go back to this again from the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, talking about the Browns' additions to the defensive line.
I think obviously Dalvin Tomlinson is going to help with that. You're still really unsettled, though, at that other defensive tackle spot. You're hoping for something to materialize between Jordan Elliott, Tristan Hill, and Perrion Winfrey, and I don't like having eggs in that basket. I think it'd be nice if they had another guy there. Maybe Shelby Harris, give him a call, see what he's doing, bring him over. He knows Ethan Pocic, be helpful. Maybe he doesn't know Ethan Pocic because he was on Seattle last year and Pocic wasn't, but point being, go find yourself an upgraded 3-tech if you can. But bringing in Zadarius Smith is absolutely necessary without Jadeveon Clowney being back in the mix, and so is Ogbo Okoronkwo. I think they needed both of those additions to stabilize the edge. They needed Dalvin Tomlinson. I still think they need a little bit more at defensive tackle, especially when your stack backers behind them are like Anthony Walker, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Those are guys that are lighter, right? They're more matchup-specific type players. And you want them to be able to run free. And it's going to be difficult for them with kind of this 3-tech situation and the lack of overall depth there at defensive tackle. Edge is a better situation with the arrival of Smith and Okoronkwo, but still concerned about defensive tackle.
And Casey, we've talked about that. And the main thing, the reason that concerns you is even Anthony Walker's a little undersized. Owusu-Koramoah, undersized. Your linebackers have to be free to go and play fast like they're capable of.
Oh, absolutely. You can see they feel the exact same way we felt about the situation the entire time. Yes, you go add Dalvin Tomlinson. That is a massive get. But you're one injury to him from being exactly where you were last year. Now, the front office did go and add 2 lottery tickets here, and Maurice Hurst and Tristan Hill. And if just one of those hits, maybe we don't feel as pessimistic about the position group as we do currently. But, once again, for the 3rd season in a row, we're talking up Jordan Elliott, saying this is going to be the year. That just does not inspire a bunch of confidence. So, if they can go get a veteran defensive tackle to add next to Tomlinson and make those other guys simply depth pieces, I think we'd all feel better off about it.
Yeah, and in fairness, in passing situations, they're going to kick people inside, but again, you're concerned about the run without question. So the guys on that, the draft dudes, were very. They like the Browns roster a lot. You wrote an article about that. Do you agree with them? Should we like the Browns roster as much as the draft dudes do?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at what they're doing here in this exercise, they place every player on the roster in a bucket, all the way from roster cornerstone to incomplete evaluation, quality starter, adequate starter. And the Browns rank out pretty good. I mean, you're looking at a team with 6 roster cornerstones on it. And across the league, you don't see a lot of that. They have 7 quality starters. That's like overall, they're in a pretty good position. Of course, there's some guys you might disagree with here or there. They had Martin Emerson as an incomplete evaluation. That's someone I would push back on. I think he had 782 snaps last year, played in some really high-pressure moments. I think you saw enough out of Emerson that you could at least place him in the adequate starter bucket going into year 2. But he has the upper bound limits to be someone who could eventually be a roster cornerstone if we're talking 2 or 3 years down the line. But I think it's a really helpful exercise. And if you look at some of the better teams in the league, they stack up right with the Eagles and 49ers.
Yeah, and we heard earlier in the show they view kind of Deshaun Watson as incomplete just because hadn't played in a couple of years, and they're trying to forecast what 2023 looks like.
Yeah. I mean, this is someone who was a roster cornerstone earlier in his career, but you can't ignore the rust he accumulated during that 700-day self-inflicted layoff, and after what we saw for the 6 games last year, it would be impossible to, bang the table and say exactly what you're going to get out of him this year. So I think an incomplete evaluation is the only thing you could do with Deshaun Watson at this point.
Casey Kinnamon and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about the Browns' receiving core and Kevin Stefanski. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnamon from Dawg Pound Daily. Additions to the wide receiving core for the Browns, including Elijah Moore. Here is the guys from the NFL Scouting, the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast about the Browns wide receiving core.
I'm intrigued with Elijah Moore coming over. I think we all are. Flashy production with the Jets, but between whatever was going on with the rift he had with the coaching staff, bad quarterback play for 2 years, I think there's a lot more ceiling for him to unlock. Donovan Peoples-Jones went out and had like 800 yards last year. There's some depth here. Marquise Goodwin, a veteran. Cedric Tillman, a recent draft pick from this past year who's got a lot of ability. See if they can get something from Jakeem Grant, who they gave a 3-year contract to and coming
David
off
Bell.
an Achilles injury. David Bell. Yeah, there's options here, and maybe Hop's on the way.
And there you go again. They like DeAndre Hopkins, and they're connecting dots. The one thing, and Browns fans get very upset about it, Donovan Peoples-Jones may play his way to a contract that the Browns don't feel comfortable giving him.
Yeah, and then it becomes a this or that situation to where if he does play himself into that stratosphere where he, has 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns, but they have to make a decision. If they want to keep him, they probably have to move off Amari Cooper, and it just becomes a tenuous situation. And I could see a very real outcome where you could see those kind of numbers for DPJ this coming year. But they've also insulated themselves by drafting Cedric Tillman to have a guy who could just take the place of a Donovan Peoples-Jones if things play out accordingly. And then like going and getting an Elijah Moore, kind of a jack of all trades, can kind of do a little bit of everything. They've stacked themselves up for any kind of eventuality. If DPJ plays himself out, they can pivot to Tillman in that role. If they decide to go with DPJ and move away from Cooper, you can slide Elijah Moore out that way. I think it's one of the most underrated things Barry's done this offseason is get younger, get faster, but most importantly, be more versatile so they can handle these situations as they come down the line.
And the fan base isn't used to having to make these decisions because this is a talented roster where people are going to play their way into paydays with second contracts. We haven't had to deal with that in quite a while. So, again, these are all normal things that happen with good franchises. The Browns, they have the talent. They got to go get some wins on the football field because they're on their way to being a pretty good franchise. Pro Football Focus 2023 offseason report. Outlook for the Browns for 2023. Similar to the Ravens, the Browns have the pieces on both sides of the ball to make a championship run as long as their quarterback returns to top form. So again, they're connecting the dots between Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson because of Jackson's injuries. But again, the roster's good, but you can't get where the Browns want to go without elite quarterback play.
I think the reality is setting in for all these national, media spots where you can't ignore Cleveland's roster. It was easy to dismiss them in the offseason because they're the Browns. But as it starts to get closer, you start to see the reality is, man, they're talented and they have talent in a lot of key positions. But it all boils down to Deshaun Watson, and if he can get it going, man, this is scary. This is scary for the entire league, not just the AFC North. And I I put them in a little bit of a different bucket than Baltimore, but nationally, if they're going to lump them together, there's worse spots to be in. But yeah, both teams, they hinge on the quarterback, and Baltimore doesn't know what they're going to get out of Lamar this year. He hasn't finished the season the last 2 years, and Cleveland doesn't know what they're going to get out of Watson. But all things being equal, if they both play to the top of their ability, Cleveland will get further than Baltimore, and that's my belief.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. The other thing is, there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment period for Lamar Jackson going into Todd Monken's offensive system. There just is. And I'm not saying he can't do it, but there will be an adjustment period to what they do. All right, CBS Sport. 8 hot seat candidates to watch in the NFL. Kevin Stefanski is on that list, 4th year, a 26-24 record. They list his playoff record at 1-1. Remember, there was Prefer was actually the coach because of COVID and all that when they beat the Steelers. But I don't know about the hot seat. That's kind of a mythical thing. The bottom line is the talent's there, the roster's good, the expectations are that you win and you make the playoffs. I would imagine in Berea, and Kevin Stefanski probably expects that. And if you don't meet expectations, people usually lose their jobs in the NFL.
Yeah, I think there's a very different view externally as opposed to internally. I don't think they're going into the season thinking, man, this doesn't go well, we're getting rid of this guy. Now, that could obviously happen. Like if this ends up being a dumpster fire, yeah, of course, that'll be the head that comes rolling. It isn't going to be the quarterback, and it's not going to be the owner. He's likely to believe it'll be the head coach, first shown the exit. But I could also see an outcome where this team finishes 10-7, but misses the playoffs just because of the quality of depth in the AFC. I don't think Stefanski just gets axed because of that. I think this would have to go substantially wrong for him to be shown the door. But I just don't see that in the variance of outcomes, unless there is a major injury or more to the key members of this team. I'd say they keep it on the rails, and if it keeps it on the rails, just keep it the trajectory. I think it's natural to just see, since Haslam took ownership of the team, it was just a revolving door. 1 year, maybe a guy got 2 years. It just kept happening like that. And then I think it's just weird they're in a period, people don't know how to take it, that they're in this sustained period of just, they're bringing all these coaches back. And this is year 4 for Stefanski and all of his offensive assistant coaches. That's not happened in my lifetime, so it's even new to me. But I think that we just need to get a grasp. I don't think he's on the hot seat that most people want to put him on, unless this just goes horribly wrong.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am with it. Could he lose his job? Yeah, but he could also end up having a pretty good year and getting a long-term deal, a second contract as well. Both outcomes are likely. All right, Pro Football Focus off-season report. Early position battles to watch for the Browns. They go with Grant Delpit versus Rodney McLeod, current starting strong safety. Delpit, serviceable during his first 2 years. Overall coverage grade 65.0, looking to elevate his play. And you see McLeod, who had a career best coverage grade 85.3 last season, and a couple interceptions and forced incompletions. When we talk about position battles, it's kind of interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of 3 safeties where both those guys play.
Exactly where I'm at. I'm looking at that. I'm thinking, battle, okay, for who gets the first snap of the game, maybe. But you're going to see 3 safeties or 3 corners. What you're going to see is 2 linebackers. That's what we know. It's either going to be matchup like based. So if you're playing the Bengals, you probably see more 3 cornerback sets. But, given the way the NFL is, I think you're going to see a lot more 3 safeties, and you're going to see a lot more of Delpit roaming around. And McLeod can play both, post and strong. So he's going to be that interchangeable piece where, you might, if you sub him in, you'd be for Thornhill or Delpit. But you're also going to see a ton of snaps with all 3 of those guys on the field together.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's one of the reasons they haven't been in a big hurry to go out and find a free agent linebacker, is because they're going to be playing Owusu-Koramoah. Kanasik's probably earned some snaps. Anthony Walker. You're going to be mixing and matching a couple of those guys. All right, before I let you go, that same article, Pro Football Focus 2023 offseason report, remaining team needs, and I found this one kind of head-scratching too. cornerback depth. I guess you can never have enough cornerbacks, but they do have A.J. Green, who's been pretty good. They drafted Cameron Mitchell. I think they have one of the deepest cornerback, quote-unquote, rooms in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm out on this. You got 3 starting caliber corners. You got A.J. Green, who could start on some teams, I believe, on the outside. You got Thomas Graham. You went and got Mike Ford, and I think that's basically a special teams get. But then you draft Cameron Mitchell, and when I watch his tape, I think that's a guy we're going to be talking about in 2 or 3 years. Like, how did they get him so late? I think that this room is stacked. I don't see this at all. I think if you were going to argue that even in the same vein, I think safety's way thinner. I think you have 3 playable guys, and beyond that, you just don't know. I think that if you're going to argue about depth, I think you would point to the safeties. I definitely would look at cornerback.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think cornerback is almost as deep as wide receiver at this point as well. Casey Kinnamon, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and insight. Thanks very much, Casey.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.
Casey Kinnamon, make sure you check him out. Dawg Pound Daily, always really good Browns coverage and insight. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.